Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. Folks, there's not a whole lot to say today. Purdue lost 66-7 in what is the largest margin of defeat in Purdue history, per my friend Alan Karpick, the president of goldenblack.com, on the Boilermaker Sports Wrap show yesterday. Sounds like this is it. The largest margin of defeat in Purdue history. The much-anticipated return of Notre Dame to West Lafayette, the much-anticipated renewal of the rivalry, fell as flat as it possibly could. For the Boilermakers, just 2 games into the season, it is getting hot, the conversation around this team. As always, we're going to break down the game. We're going to talk big picture about where Purdue football is today. I know this isn't going to be the most fun episode to record. Probably not going to be the most fun episode for a lot of you to listen to, but we're going to do our best anyways. If you don't already, be sure to follow the show on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. You can always send in questions, of which I have received many for today's show. Send them in on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond, or you can email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe. There's a lot of season left. We're going to be here every step of the way. And for those who are a little more frustrated, I know Purdue basketball tweeted that it's 50 days until kickoff or until tip-off. And we'll be talking Purdue basketball here before you know it. But let's dive into this thing. Notre Dame 66, Purdue 7. Look, this outcome, I don't mean a 59-point loss. This was a complete stunner in every sense of the term. A dominant Notre Dame win was always on the table. Even after last week, when Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois, that possibility did not come off the table. But what happened last week when Notre Dame lost to Northern Illinois is that the hope became greater that Purdue could do this, Purdue could pull off a win against Notre Dame and really springboard itself as a program. What didn't change, based off of Notre Dame's loss to Northern Illinois, is that Notre Dame is capable of really beating teams up. We've seen it for a long time with Notre Dame. Since Brian Kelly kind of righted the ship up there, Notre Dame has been pretty good at beating teams up. And that's exactly what happened on Saturday. You know, I'm not going to sit here and pretend to know the ins and outs of what happened in South Bend last weekend, because for anyone in their right mind watching that game yesterday in Ross-Ade Stadium, it is incomprehensible that Notre Dame team could have lost to a MAC program. But Notre Dame is a much better team than what it showed in that game against Northern Illinois. And because of that, Purdue would have had to play a really good game to pull this one off, to have a chance at it. Purdue would have had to play really clean. Purdue would have had to play really crisp. All of the things we talked about on the pregame podcast, Purdue would have had to do. But Purdue didn't do any of that. The outcome was beyond the worst possible imagination. Purdue loses 66-7 in a game where it was thoroughly outclassed in every phase of the game. To me, the first series was a little bit ominous. Notre Dame 5-play touchdown drive goes right down the field, but it's how Notre Dame did that made its impression on me. I believe every snap on that drive featured pre-snap motion where Notre Dame was getting Purdue's defenders out of position and Purdue could not overcome it. Purdue was getting moved out and Notre Dame was attacking the hole that was created. Notre Dame created space and Purdue didn't cover it well. Purdue didn't close the space well. It was apparent immediately. You know, that first touchdown run, 48 yards, C.J. Madden overplays the mesh point. Riley Leonard hands it off to Jeremiah Love. He gets to the edge, and then Kydron Jenkins can't chase him down. Kydron Jenkins wasn't able to get there in time 48-yard touchdown. So Purdue gets the ball back down 7-0 before most people have a chance to open their boiler golds, and Purdue can't block Notre Dame. It's immediate right away that Purdue cannot block Notre Dame. The pass protection gave Hudson Card no time to work with, and there's plenty to say about this, but the offensive line was horrible. The left side of the offensive line really needed help. Muhammad Musa had a rough day. Josh Sales split some time with Corey Stewart out there. Had a really rough day. Corey Stewart didn't have a great day. Name it on the offensive line. Purdue really struggled because Hudson Card didn't stand a chance on most of those plays. He abandoned the pocket a lot, trying to make something happen. It is what it is. And with that, on the same note, Purdue's receivers weren't creating separation downfield. It's not like there was much open as Hudson Card was running around. Keep in mind, and this is a fact, that it's an elite secondary that Notre Dame has. You can't ignore that reality. This is, at minimum, a top 2 secondary that Purdue's going to face this year, because Ohio State's is astronomically loaded as well. But not many teams are going to have success throwing on Notre Dame. We talked about it last week. Almost half of Northern Illinois' damage came on one play that was a broken tackle that went 83 yards for a passing touchdown. The first time you saw a Purdue receiver really come open downfield was into the second half on the second series when Cam Brown was wide open, only because the safety took out the corner, a complete miscommunication. It wasn't a game where Purdue had options to throw to. And then, as the game starts to unravel, Purdue can't tackle anyone at every level, especially the linebacker spots in the secondary. Purdue could not tackle. Purdue couldn't bring down Notre Dame. Purdue really struggled with taking the right angles to make tackles. There were some plays that were very nice by Notre Dame, don't get me wrong, but there were also plays where Purdue overplays, and a simple cutback is getting there, or Purdue doesn't get into a position to make a tackle, and it's a simple half juke, and they're gone. It was a 5-alarm fire for Purdue. Notre Dame was better at the point of attack, and Notre Dame was better in space. The first one, we already knew. No one thought that Purdue was going to come in there and be the better team at the point of attack. That wasn't realistic. That was never going to happen. This is not Notre Dame's best offensive line, but Purdue wasn't going to be great at the point of attack. But for Purdue's athletes to be exposed so badly is a real point of concern. Notre Dame is not known to be a tremendously athletic program. This is not Oregon or Ohio State. The knock on Notre Dame for quite a while is that it's not athletic enough. It's had the guys on the offensive line. It's had the tight ends, but it hasn't had the receivers. It hasn't had the dynamic athletes, on the back end or running back. That hasn't been a strength of Notre Dame's. But Purdue was thoroughly out-athleted, and that's what's really concerning. On the defensive side of the ball, look, 66 points is an abomination, and it's even worse because this was a one-dimensional Notre Dame offense for the most part. Yes, Riley Leonard threw the ball, but only 5 of his passes were 5 or more air yards downfield. He did not try to throw the ball deep on Purdue at all. But even with the advantage that Purdue had of knowing that Notre Dame couldn't really throw the ball downfield, Purdue couldn't slow down Notre Dame because Purdue couldn't stop the run. Purdue could not find a way to penetrate the middle, and its edges could not get in the backfield and bring anyone down. And at the second level, Purdue wasn't quick enough and Purdue couldn't tackle well enough. That entire premise that Purdue really struggled so badly against an offense that didn't try to throw it is very concerning. That is very, very concerning. And on offense, Purdue never stood a chance. And I know the scheme is coming into question, and I don't disagree with some of those questions. Purdue's offense doesn't look good. And we've seen it now. When Purdue plays higher level competition, Purdue's offense doesn't look great. But it's not like Purdue could run the football in this game. Even when you adjust for sack yardage, Purdue ran for about 3 yards a carry, and that was with garbage time included. When this thing was still, well, I don't know if it ever really was in doubt, but, in the first half, in the first 3 quarters, Purdue couldn't run the ball at all. No one was open downfield. The offensive line had no time. Hudson Card is not some generationally elite quarterback to overcome that stuff. And when you combine that, the offense with the defense both being really poor, that's how you get 66-7. That's how you get laughed out of your own building. When you look at the big picture, obviously what the first thing most people probably think is, my God, how bad is Indiana State? Purdue beat Indiana State 49-0 and then loses 66-7 to Notre Dame. Purdue looked like an improved football team against the Sycamores. I think everyone who sat at that game walked away from it saying, man, Purdue looks better than it did last year. And then in this one, Purdue gets outclassed top to bottom, every sense of the imagination. What's the reality of this team? The reality probably is that it's never as good or never as bad as it looks. But right now it looks really bad. And the beauty of college football is that you bounce back in a week, right? No matter how Purdue handles this, Purdue flies out to Corvallis, Oregon to take on the Beavers on Saturday. This is not something where Purdue can sit around and feel sorry for itself. The whole how does the team respond type of thing is always the easy question to ask and all of that. But I think the better question is, where does Purdue go from here? Yeah, the team should respond. If the team doesn't respond well, if the team doesn't come out and compete, then you have some big problems on your hands, because this was horrendous. This was one of the lowest points, single game, in Purdue football recent memory. And we've had those blowout losses in the bowl games to Auburn and LSU. And there was the Darrell Hazell years. But, this single game is up there with all of them. It's not a great look when you're on CBS doing this to yourself. And look, I don't think the national TV thing means as much as it used to, but there are a whole lot of people who tune into Notre Dame. And as gambling gets bigger and bigger, and on Twitter I certainly tweet about that stuff, the point spread did what it did and absolutely plummeted. There was some real attention on this game, and Purdue did not perform well. If you ask me, this is the outcome that Purdue couldn't afford. I didn't expect Purdue to win this game. I probably got a little bit too into the Kool-Aid of, boy, Notre Dame was horrible against Northern Illinois. What's the reality of that? I probably got into that a little too much. I did not expect Purdue to win this game, though. I did not. And this Purdue getting blown out doesn't necessarily surprise me. The way it happened surprised me. I said over the summer, and I told this to a colleague on Friday, I thought the game was going to play out like the 2017 Michigan game, where Purdue was able to hang in there for a little bit, and it was hotter than hell at Ross-Ade Stadium, so it kind of played out that way a little bit. same way it was in 2017 against Michigan. But I thought Purdue was going to hang in there for a while, and then mid-third quarter, early fourth quarter, you can tell it's just Notre Dame doesn't have it, or Purdue doesn't have it. Purdue's not gonna get it done. That's not how it played out. Purdue could have been fine with that, and I think Purdue takes that as almost a moral victory. Obviously, Purdue wins the game. Yeah, you're cloud nine. But this is what Purdue couldn't afford. An embarrassment is what Purdue couldn't afford. Hope is a beautiful thing, and Purdue fans had a lot of hope coming into this, but it's all gone. And I said before the season, Purdue has to find a way to reward its fan base, because Purdue's fan base has been excellent coming into this season. I like to think I pay quite a bit of attention to the pulse of the Purdue fan base on Twitter, on Golden Black message boards. You know, I'm there all the time, and I interact with a lot of you guys on Twitter, and I appreciate those of you who do reach out to the show. Purdue fans were very willing to give Ryan Walters a pass for year one. Purdue fans were willing to look past that. But Purdue fans aren't looking past this. It's becoming pretty clear. Purdue's fans are upset, and they should be. You should be upset for this. This is there's no acceptable time to lose 66-7, especially against a really good, but not a top program in the country type of deal. This comes for all coaches. You know, you've seen it. I've gotten plenty of tweets that Ryan Walters should be fired. I've gotten plenty of, tweets that Ryan Walters is on the hot seat. I've had several of you who listen to this podcast who I know personally ask what the buyout is, things like that. Nothing's happening this year, but once those questions start being asked, it's tough to get out of that. It's not easy. The mood of the fan base is very important. You can't lose the fan base. We saw what that looked like late in the Danny Hope era. And that's why Purdue fired a coach who did make back-to-back bowl games. The fan base was gone. Attendance at Ross-Ade Stadium was poor. Engagement from the fan base was poor. And then obviously Purdue got the next hire wrong, and things went in a terrible direction. But it's even twofold now because you have NIL as part of this. You have the transfer portal as part of this, where you have to have a collective to raise money to go acquire talent. And if you don't have a fan base that's bought in to what's being sold from the top, I don't know that you can improve your roster in those ways. And that's a real problem. It's, again, I don't want to overreact because things are never as good or as bad as they seem. Right now, things seem terrible, but there are 10 games left in this season, and if Purdue has a fine rest of this season, then we probably look back on this and say, God, what an awful day, but things weren't so bad after all. If things go really poorly this year, then you look at this as the time that it became apparent that things weren't going well for Purdue football. And I hope that's not true. I love football. I love talking about football on this show. The one thing I never want this show to turn into is a basketball-only podcast, but it's not good when you're 2 games into the season and fans are already looking ahead to basketball season. Going to answer some questions here and then a couple quick thoughts on Oregon State. Again, thank you to those of you who send in questions. I greatly appreciate it. You can send those to me on Twitter at BoilersBeyond. You can email them to me at boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. First question, how does this Notre Dame loss compare to last year's blowout losses, the Michigan and Ohio State games? It's far worse. It is far, far worse. You have the component that this roster is supposed to be improved, and I do think it is, but the roster is supposed to be better. This wasn't supposed to be something that could happen in year 2. But also, both of those teams, last year's Michigan and Ohio State teams, are better by a fair margin than this year's Notre Dame team. Last year's Michigan team was excellent. That was a phenomenal team that was smash mouth as can be, had a dominating defense, an incredible run game, and J.J. McCarthy was good enough. But that's a national championship team you lost to. This Notre Dame team doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of winning a national title. It might find a way to make the playoffs still. I don't know. We'll see, but it's very realistic that it would end the season as a top 12 team when you power rate things. But not a national championship contender. And last year's Ohio State team, it was unbeaten through 11 games. It lost to Michigan. It had the ball with a chance to win the game on the last drive when Kyle McCord threw the pick, but ultimately Ohio State was kind of a quarterback away last year. Notre Dame is more than a quarterback away from being a national title contender. 66-7 is just truly unbelievable. This is worse, and this really, this is probably, this is the worst loss in a long time. In terms of just what the mood of it, it's worse than those bowl games. Because bowl games are exhibition games. They're fun. I love bowl games, but this is worse. This is in front of your home crowd. I don't know. This is as bad of a loss as Purdue's had in some time. 14 games in, Walter's defense looks ... question mark. Well, I'd say overmatched. This is a scheme that requires some real talent. It's a scheme that Purdue is unbelievably married to, and that's fine. If you're going to hire the coach who got to where he was based on a scheme, you should be all in on it. But so far, it's not looking good. Purdue doesn't have the elite bodies up front. It's not that physical at the line of scrimmage, and that's a problem. The speed at linebacker isn't good enough. We had a question about that last week, with the Indiana State game, where it came into question. And I said, let's see it against a real opponent. But to see that problem persist and really be exasperated against Notre Dame, that's real. That's a very real problem that Purdue has. And then in the back end, I don't know that Purdue is tremendous in the back end. Certainly tackling opposing runners was a massive problem for Purdue. And we haven't seen Purdue face a big passing attack yet, but we'll see. Doesn't look good right now. Why were the ends crashing in so hard and not setting an edge on defense? And why no adjustments with personnel groupings on offense that could have helped the line that was overmatched? Yeah, in terms of the ends crashing so hard, I don't know. I don't know. Clearly, just reading the mesh point was a real problem because Notre Dame ran wild a lot on Purdue. Sheeta Soleil, CJ Madden, they struggled really badly. It's not something you would expect with 2 weeks of prep for a quarterback that is known to be very good on his feet. That's what's really concerning, is you had 2 weeks of prep for this. On offense, I mean, sure, you can go 2 tight end stuff, or you can bring in Furtney as an H-back, but at some point, when you bring in more protection, you're also giving yourself like 2 or 3 route runners against an elite defense. And if you're not creating confusion against Notre Dame's defense, you don't have a chance. Your athletes aren't going to just out-athlete Notre Dame on the back end and be dominant. That doesn't exist. So the problem is the offensive line. And Purdue thought it made some improvements. Maybe it did, but so far it hasn't looked great. It really looked bad on Saturday. Was there anything positive you saw besides the punting? No. Keelan Crimmins looked pretty good. He's no Tory Taylor, but he does seem to be an improvement from Jack Ansell. That's a positive. Past that, no. It was rough. How do they respond to this, and what does Walters need to do to get them motivated? Look, in terms of I'll start with the latter part. You shouldn't have to motivate your team after you lose 66-7. I mean, that is humiliating. And you should have enough from Twitter screenshots and articles that you can print out and post across the locker room. That should motivate them well enough if you have competitors in that locker room. In terms of how do they respond, I don't know. You hope well. You hope very well. Ryan Walters said in his postgame they had a very pointed conversation, and guys are unhappy, guys are angry, guys are frustrated. They should be. We'll see. I think now you look at Oregon State as a must-win because that game against Nebraska doesn't look good. At Illinois looks tougher than you thought. Wisconsin looks bad, but look, you can't go to September, or you can't go to October at 1-3. And if Purdue loses this one, Nebraska looks pretty daunting. Purdue has to find a way at Oregon State. Line opened up at 6. Oregon State favored by 6. That also should motivate you. The Pac-12 didn't want these guys, and it's a 6-point spread. That's a massive, massive slap in the face. We'll see how Purdue responds. And then the last one is a rather tough one, but exactly what level of awful is Purdue this year? It's like they'd be a bottom feeder in the MAC. Purdue would not be a bottom feeder in the MAC. Purdue would probably win the MAC. I know transitive property with Northern Illinois doesn't look great, but Purdue would probably win the MAC. We'll find out. We're only 2 games in. We're going to find out just how good or bad Purdue is, but I think your concern is that coming into this, you would hoped that in year 2, the roster would be good enough to avoid this type of outcome. But clearly, it's not. And now you go to Oregon State to try to salvage something. Yeah, I mean, this is a huge game. Obviously, we'll talk about it much more later this week, but yeah, it's a big one. One thing I wanted to note, this game is on the CW. Your TV provider may or may not offer this. For my fellow YouTube TV subscribers in the Indianapolis market, the CW is not on YouTube TV in Indianapolis. To my knowledge. If it is, let me know, please. But do what you need to do. If you would like to watch the game, buy an antenna, find a different provider, do whatever you want. I'll be buying an antenna. But you'll want to take a look at that if you want to watch the game on Saturday. I hope this was decent enough. I'm not fire the coach guy, but this was a really tough showing. Saturday was a day that was a massive opportunity for Purdue, and it went beyond worst possible imagination. We'll see what happens over the next 10 games, but no matter what, we'll be bringing you coverage here on Boilers and Beyond. That's all I have for today. I will probably drop the pregame podcast on Thursday this week, so expect it on Thursday. In the meantime, send over your questions about the Beavers on Twitter at BoilersBeyond or on email, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. I'll be back then. Until Thursday, have a great week, everyone, and take care.